Claire Spencer tends to have nightmares and anxiety, especially considering that her daughter from her first marriage, Caitlin, is about to go to college. The Spencers' new neighbors, Warren and Mary Furr, are constantly arguing. Claire is happy in her marriage with her husband Norman. Everything in their life seems perfect. Before breakfast, Norman as usual went for a run and to walk their dog Cooper. Claire and Caitlin packed the girls' belongings into the car. The separation is very difficult for both mother and daughter. After taking the daughter to college, the couple hugged her. Caitlin's dorm roommate, by the way, is named Beatrice. As they were leaving, Claire couldn't hold back her tears. In the evening before going to bed, while Norman was working on his laptop, Claire waited for him to finish. For Norman, his work is very important. Claire had already come to terms with her daughter's departure. Now the couple had time to live for themselves. Later, they heard sounds of passion from the direction of the neighbor's house. It seemed the Furs were making up vigorously. In the morning, while sorting through things, Claire found something that reminded her of the daughter. Later, she was looking through a family photo album, which also contained newspaper clippings dedicated to Norman's father. Professor of mathematics Wendell Spencer had already passed away. His theorem is considered the greatest achievement in number theory. Memories of a recent accident caused Claire pain. Unable to bear it, she ran outside and cried in the garden. However, Claire quickly calmed down when she heard crying from the neighbor's yard. It was Mary, who was shouting that she was in danger and that life with her husband was unbearable. Claire wanted to help the woman and invited her for a cup of coffee. When Warren returned, Mary hurried back into the house, asking Claire to forget their conversation. Claire continued to watch through a gap in the fence as Warren arrived in his car, and in the evening over dinner, she shared with Norman what had happened. Claire wants to go to the neighbors and make sure Mary is okay, but Norman thought it was a bad idea, believing they should not interfere in other people's lives. Norman's thoughts are now entirely occupied with the upcoming conference, which will be a significant step in his career. The next day, while her husband was at work, Claire went to the neighbor's house with some treats, but they weren't home. Claire was visited by her friend Jody. She is very worried about Claire because it has been a very tough year for her, the only daughter leaving, the accident and other unpleasant events. Claire complains to her friend about boredom. She has no activities now except taking care of the roses in the garden. Jody gave Claire a soothing tea and showed off her new car, saying that alimony is just a wonderful thing. At night, Claire was killing time by playing solitaire on the computer, but the power went out due to the storm. Looking out the window, Claire saw the neighbor placing a rolled-up carpet into the trunk of his car. Claire panicked and woke her husband, but by the time Norman got to the window, both Warren and the car were gone. Claire herself can't really explain what she saw. The entire next day, Claire couldn't shake off the feeling of anxiety, and their dog Cooper was acting strangely, as if he was afraid of something. When Claire was retrieving the dog's toy from the lake, she saw a woman's face in the water for a few moments. A phone call startled her. It was Norman, saying he would be delayed by 2 hours. Later, Claire was calling for Cooper, who had run off somewhere but to no avail. Returning to the house, Claire found the door unlocked. Suddenly the tape recorder turned on and off by itself. Frightened, Claire went to the husband's work at the pharmaceutical lab. Norman can't imagine how he will go to the press conference in another city and leave his wife alone in such a state. Claire assured him that everything was fine, she must have been imagining things. Norman shared that today he met his idol, who started praising the Spencer theorem. Norman doesn't like that his late father overshadows him. Claire advised her husband not to react so sharply. The next day, while Claire was doing routine household chores, a photograph fell off the table by itself. The glass shattered. This photograph captured the day Dr. Spencer received a prestigious award. Later, Claire went to the neighbor's house again, but it seemed no one was home once more. On the porch, she saw a woman's shoe with a red stain. The car was parked nearby. Leaving a basket of flowers and wine by the door, Claire was about to leave when Warren came out of the house. Trying to stay calm, Claire introduced herself as a neighbor and said she just wanted to congratulate them on their housewarming. Warren replied rather politely that he was in a hurry and that his wife wasn't home at the moment. All day Claire spied on Warren from her window using binoculars. She saw him throw away the flowers and basket, but he kept the wine. At some point Claire thought Warren noticed her. For a few minutes Claire hid, and then she lost sight of Warren. The dog outside was barking loudly. Norman caught his wife spying on the neighbor. She was so engrossed that she forgot they were supposed to have dinner at a restaurant with Dr. Stan Powell and his new girlfriend. On the way, Claire shared her concerns with the husband about Mary's sudden disappearance. Could Warren have harmed his wife? Claire never expected that Stan's new girlfriend would be her old acquaintance Elena. The women hadn't seen each other in a long time. The two couples had a wonderful time talking and drinking wine. It turns out Claire and Norman haven't been married for very long. Her first husband, Michael, a musician, perished. Claire also played the cello but quit. One day after a solo concert, Claire met a brilliant scientist, and 3 months later they were married. Now Norman hardly teaches anymore and mostly conducts research. Norman inherited an old house by the lake from his father. He and his wife have almost completely renovated it. When Claire mentioned that things in the house moved by themselves, Elena said she fully believes in the supernatural, but Norman found it an occasion for jokes. However, Claire continues to notice strange occurrences in the house. One day she found an antique key. The question is, what does it open? At one point Claire noticed mist coming from the bathroom. She slowly walked inside. The tub was filled. Suddenly Claire saw a woman in the reflection of the water and screamed. Norman rushed to her scream. Shortly after this, Claire, at her husband's insistence, started seeing a psychotherapist, complaining about nightmares and excessive anxiety. Claire also believes she saw the ghost of a woman with green eyes. Now Claire isn't sure if she knows this woman. The psychiatrist suggested Claire try communicating with the ghost to understand the motive for the contact. That same day, Claire bought a Ouija board. Even though Jody doesn't believe in the supernatural, she decided to support her friend and participate in the seance. Claire also brought Mary's shoe, convinced it was her ghost. Throughout the attempts to summon Mary's spirit, Jody couldn't stop laughing. Suddenly the candle flame trembled, and Jody stopped laughing. The pointer on the Ouija board started moving on its own. The flame went out completely, and the interior door opened by itself. The women screamed in fright, but it was just the dog Cooper. Later, Claire asked her friend not to tell Norman about the seance. A year ago Claire had an accident, crashing into a tree, and since then Norman treats her as if she's lost her mind. Jody left, and Claire put away the Ouija board and other paraphernalia. Suddenly mist started coming from the bathroom again. Claire went in and found the tub filled once more. The mirror was fogged up. Claire leaned over the tub and then loudly asked the ghost what it wanted. On the fogged up mirror the words "you know" appeared. Claire rushed out of the room. The computer started to go crazy. Later, Claire approached the husband and said that Mary is dead and her spirit lives in their house. Something terrible happened to her. Norman got angry, accusing Claire of trying to ruin his conference. The couple argued. Claire could no longer stay in the house, convinced that Mary was trying to tell her something. Claire sought out Warren and publicly accused him of taking his wife's life, while Norman tried to apologize. At that moment Mary approached Warren, alive and well. Apologizing once more, Norman told his wife that they should leave. Claire continues her sessions with the psychotherapist. She truly wants to get better for her husband's sake. Coming home, Claire saw a small gift from Jody at the door, a book on witchcraft and alchemy. Mary came to Claire, wanting to clear up the misunderstanding. Claire felt ashamed, but Mary was entirely friendly. Over a cup of tea, Mary told Claire about her complicated relationship with the husband. Mary had gone to her mother's for a few days to think things over, but Warren came for her. In the evening the Spencers attended a social event. Claire tried to relax, but the anxiety wouldn't leave her. An old acquaintance reminded Claire how she had felt ill at a banquet a year ago. It seemed she had seen a ghost. Only now did Claire realize she didn't even remember that. Strange things continue to happen at home. The photo frame with the picture of Norman's father's award ceremony keeps falling. Only now did Claire find a newspaper clipping behind that photograph about the search for a missing girl, a graduate of the university where Norman used to teach. Claire started searching for information online. The girl's name is Madison Elizabeth Frank. By the way, her eyes are green. Seeing Madison's photo, Claire immediately noted the resemblance between them and later asked her husband if he remembered this girl. Norman doesn't understand what this all means. Claire declared that she had seen the spirit of this girl in the house. Norman is already tired of his wife's oddities, not knowing how to help her. Claire found out that Madison went missing along with her car a year ago. The police had several theories, but the investigation hit a dead end. Finding the address, Claire visited Mrs. Frank, Madison's mother, who misses her daughter very much. The woman recalls that Madison loved attending parties but also did well in her studies. When asked why she was here, Claire couldn't give a clear answer. Mrs. Frank offered to show her Madison's room. The girl was not only beautiful but also received an increased scholarship. She was the pride of her mother. Claire couldn't help but notice the striking resemblance between Madison and herself. It was as if Madison was Claire in her youth. While Mrs. Frank was distracted, Claire stealthily took Madison's pigtail to repeat the seance. Norman as usual came home late. Claire started acting as if she were Madison, Norman's student. He was confused, not understanding what had gotten into his wife. At one point Claire noticed the front door opening by itself. On the threshold she saw herself in a state of deep shock. Of course Norman saw nothing of the sort. When Claire told Norman that his wife seemed to suspect them, he pushed her away in fear. Claire snapped out of her possessed state, remembering what had happened a year ago. That evening, Claire had come home late and caught the husband cheating on her with his student. Claire was so upset that she left the house and got into an accident, resulting in partial amnesia. At the banquet, Claire had also seen Madison, which triggered a panic attack. Norman tried to justify himself, saying it meant nothing, but Claire didn't want to see him anymore, telling him to get out. She had sacrificed everything for this marriage, including her musical career. Norman yelled that he had just made a mistake because his wife spent much more time with her daughter instead of him. Claire no longer wanted to hear any excuses and left to stay with Jody. It turned out that Jody had once seen Norman and Madison together but didn't have the courage to tell Claire because she didn't want to ruin her marriage. Claire doesn't hold a grudge against the friend. There was a voicemail on Jody's answering machine from worried Norman, who was looking everywhere for his wife. However, Claire was not ready to talk to him. She returned home only the next morning and found that the electricity was out. In the filled bathtub lay Norman, holding a hairdryer. Claire immediately called an ambulance. Fortunately, Norman regained consciousness without serious harm. He refused hospitalization, assuring that he had accidentally taken the hairdryer. He was saved only because the power went out. Claire placed Madison's pigtail into the book on witchcraft. Norman hopes that his wife will stay and forgive him. Claire wants her husband to honestly answer if he has anything to do with Madison's disappearance. Norman confessed that when he wanted to break up with Madison, she came to their house and threatened to harm his family. Norman drove Madison away, and after that, she disappeared. Claire is convinced that they are being haunted by Madison's vengeful spirit. The pigtail has given her strength in the world of the living. Norman countered, saying that they don't know for sure if Madison is dead. Claire now wants to be alone and rest to think things over. Norman called his longtime friend Teddy, asking about his buddy who specializes in paranormal phenomena. When Claire fell asleep, Norman carefully covered her with a blanket and found the book on witchcraft. Claire was only pretending to sleep, however. Norman studied the book. Even though he is a scientist, recent events have made him believe in ghosts. Soon he received a call from the paranormal specialist. Norman said that someone close to him believes she is being contacted by a ghost, and it's definitely not hallucinations. Norman is interested in whether there is a rational explanation for such a phenomenon. Suddenly Norman saw Claire walking toward the lake. In her hand she held Madison's pigtail. Before Norman could stop her, Claire jumped into the water. Norman immediately jumped in after her. At the bottom, Claire found some sort of chest, but at that moment the husband pulled her out of the water. Learning that the pigtail belonged to Madison, Norman suggested burning it. Maybe this way Madison would lose her connection to the world of the living. For Claire, it is important that the husband now believes her. Soon Claire returned to playing the cello, feeling that Madison was gone. Norman doesn't know how to beg his wife's forgiveness. Despite the pain of betrayal, Claire agreed to give Norman a chance. To clear their minds, the couple decided to go on a boat trip. Suddenly Claire suggested to her husband that they go to the town of Atmand. It was there that Jody had seen Norman and Madison in a cafe shortly before the girl's disappearance. In reality, Claire is only pretending to have forgiven her husband. Claire had almost forgotten about that mysterious key. Later in Adamant, Claire found the cafe. In the window there were many souvenirs with the same symbol, similar to the one on the key. At night while Norman slept, Claire dove back to the bottom of the lake and retrieved the chest, opening it with the key. Inside she discovered Madison's locket, which horrified her. Claire grabbed the phone, intending to call the police, but the husband interrupted, saying she misunderstood everything. According to Norman, Madison voluntarily passed away in their home, leaving a letter in the chest. Norman burned the letter immediately. A week before that, Madison had shown up at the banquet. She didn't want to break up with Norman and became obsessed with him. This made him agree to one last meeting with her, but Madison had other plans. Norman left the body in the lake in her own car. He didn't want to sacrifice his marriage, career, and life. Now Norman was begging the wife for forgiveness again. Claire said Madison should be buried properly. Norman called 911 himself, saying he had information about missing Madison Frank. After that, Norman went to change his clothes. Hearing the sound of running water in the bathroom, Claire went upstairs. When she picked up the phone, she realized that Norman had called a different number, not 911. Sneaking up from behind, Norman attacked Claire with a chloroform-soaked towel. She managed to break free and ran downstairs but fell. Due to the chloroform, Claire was immobilized. Norman regretfully said he didn't want things to turn out this way, but Madison forced his hand by threatening to reveal their relationship to the dean. Norman had no choice but to take Madison's life. And now Claire left him no choice either. Taking the wife in his arms, Norman carried her upstairs, reflecting on how she managed to piece everything together. Norman placed Claire in the bathtub, plugged the drain and turned on the water. The same thing he had once done to Madison. By the way, he had also faked the recent accident in the bathtub to elicit Claire's sympathy. After that, Norman called Jody, saying that he and Claire had a big fight. He claimed he would stay overnight at the lab and asked Jody to check on Claire in the morning. Suddenly Norman noticed Madison's locket around Claire's neck. For a moment Norman saw Madison instead of Claire, and he was so frightened that he fell and seriously injured himself. Despite her partial immobilization, Claire managed to pull the drain plug from the bathtub and get out. She still had difficulty walking. Alas, Claire couldn't reach the police because something was wrong with the phone. Seeing someone behind the door, Claire was terrified. There were clear signs of a struggle. Picking up a shard of the mirror, she looked into the reflection but saw no one. Quietly and slowly descending the stairs, Claire screamed when she saw Norman lying on the floor below. Since Norman showed no signs of life, Claire tried to get the spare phone from his pocket. However, Claire panicked when the husband moved his fingers, and she ran outside. Claire got into the car and drove, intending to get to the police. Catching a signal on the bridge, she stopped to use the phone, and at that moment Norman broke into the car. In the ensuing struggle, the car rolled off the bridge into the river. Both Claire and Norman were trapped as the car quickly sank underwater. Claire tried to escape, but Norman wouldn't let her. Claire pleaded with him to think of Caitlin, but Norman couldn't allow anyone to know the truth about him. Claire was even more horrified when she saw another car at the bottom, with Madison's body inside. Suddenly Madison grabbed Norman, holding him underwater. This allowed Claire to escape and surface. This is how Madison saved her and got revenge on Norman. In the final scene, we see Claire bringing flowers to Madison's grave. Madison is now properly buried. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel not to miss more exciting new products. Also, the authors will be pleased if you leave your opinion in the comments.